How much further until we're clear of this smoke?
The Rings of Power versus House of the Dragon. Well, more like where did House of the Dragon won and the Rings of Power failed. Thank you for clicking on my channel and welcome to the Real Movie Podcast. I want to start things off with one of my main issues with the Rings of Power, which is number 1, the protagonists. In House of the Dragon, we have Daemon, Rhaenyra, Rhaenys, Viserys, Alicent, Otto, etc, etc. First of all, we don't have protagonists per se, we have people. They all have something to do. They are real characters. They are not completely black, they're not completely white, they're not completely pure, they're not completely evil. They are gray. But on the other hand, we have the protagonists of the Rings of Power, which are literally and really protagonists. We have Galadriel, Elrond, Durin, Nori, Bronwyn, Arondir, etc. The protagonists of the Rings of Power are too pure to be liked. You know, when I talk to my friends, the main reasons that they don't like these guys is that they don't feel that they can approach them. They're not real. They are prophets, they are pure gold, they are the chosen ones, quote unquote. But in House of the Dragon, you can really see why people make these decisions. Worst of all, the writings of the Rings of Power does not do any help to redeem these protagonists. We do hate them by default, and the dialogues and their acts are not doing any help. But writing is another matter, which I will talk about later. This leads me to my second problem with the Rings of Power and the second point in this comparison, casting. This is not something inside the show, maybe outside the show, but the casting is really important. House of the Dragon did something smart. It did something that Game of Thrones did in the first season. In this season of House of the Dragon, we had Matt Smith, Paddy Considine, and Rhys Ifans. They are known actors. They're not superstars, but they are known actors, and beside them there are some newcomers and they build their characters beside these guys. Remember, in the first season of Game of Thrones we had Sean Bean, but the casting in the Rings of Power is just a misfire, especially for Galadriel, who is supposed to be the hero of this story. She's just completely unlikable. I mean, I really call her the Botox lady. The transition for me in House of the Dragon was way more easier than the Rings of Power. My third point is the world development. I know House of the Dragon had the upper hand because of 8 long seasons of Game of Thrones, but the Rings of Power did have 3 of the best movies of all time. A great world to present. You know, when I talk about world development, I don't only mean the geography. I mean everything. The creatures, the human, the supernatural and paranormal elements. Both of these TV shows are prequels. We know what to expect. The only thing that House of the Dragon did, to be honest, was the addition of the dragons. Almost every single thing is the same, and it is in a lot more limited area. We only follow one family or 2 families. But in addition, we have dragons. They did it right, it was good. And we know where House of the Dragon is headed. In the first episode we saw that this is like 160-70 years before Daenerys, so this TV show does have an ending point. The Rings of Power, on the other hand, it is a prequel as well, and we know that all of these will lead to Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogies, but in every episode it fails to deliver. I often felt lost in the world and I didn't know where I was watching, and I had to have some time to adapt. When you think about that, in House of the Dragon is that we have so many time jumps, and in Rings of Power the things were linear. That's where it will hit you how bad the world development of the Rings of Power is. My fourth point is referring and addressing the current issues. I don't know, to be honest, how much I can say without offending anyone and not getting into trouble, but when you make your decisions and everything about your TV show or movie about current events, your show won't be timeless. You limit it to a certain time. Rings of Power failed where I thought House of the Dragon would. I thought that House of the Dragon was about Rhaenyra being a woman, she cannot sit on the Iron Throne, and we have the power struggle between men and women. But not only this issue was the Achilles heel of House of the Dragon, but it was addressed with such delicacy that it became one of its best points. Both Rings of Power and House of the Dragon are trying to tell us that the world is not kind to women. But look at the way that House of the Dragon is doing it and the Rings of Power is doing it. For this point, I just want to compare Rhaenyra to Galadriel. They are both strong, they're warriors, they are queens, but Rhaenyra is logical. She knows that not all the time she's the smartest person in the room. She knows that she needs allies. She knows that she can use her feminine touch to affect her father and her uncle. Rhaenyra knew that she needs her husband and her father. As much as her father and her husband, they need her. Viserys needs Rhaenyra, Daemon needs Rhaenyra, and that's it. And that is beautiful. It means that people, doesn't matter man or woman or any other gender, people are vulnerable. They need others. But on the other hand, look at Galadriel. Galadriel always makes everything right. She always has to win. She is the definition of a lone wolf. And a bad thing about her is that even when she is in need and someone helps her, that person will need a bigger help from Galadriel in a few scenes or a few episodes later. That really sucks. Women's place in the world and this issue is a matter that needs to be addressed with, so much attention. But when you have a protagonist like Galadriel and you want to address, feminism through her, it just doesn't land. Because I am like 80% sure that everyone hates her. And about the diversity as well, both sexual diversity and skin color related diversity, House of the Dragon has the upper hand again, because when someone's skin color is different, it is explained why. It is dependent on where this guy or this girl lived. But just take a look at the crew of the captain's ship in the Rings of Power. How can a Chinese, a black guy, a Mexican, a Latino, how can they all be there in Numenor? That's just not right. When you want to have diversity, you have to have logic as well. And about homosexuality, look at Laenor Valarian's character. He is one of my favorite characters of the whole TV show. He is just great, especially that dialogue that he has with Rhaenyra, where he says that he wants to change, and Rhaenyra says, I love you the way that you are. Now let's talk about another point. Cinematography. Well, not gonna lie, Rings of Power is set to be $1 billion TV show. I have to give them props. It is impressive. The shots, the CGI, the directing, it is glorious. But I can't lie that it feels that it doesn't have a soul. On the other hand, we have House of the Dragon. When I searched about the budget of this TV show, the season budget was about 200 million, so for 10 episodes we have 20 per episode. But let's be honest, if we compare these TV shows, Rings of Power does not look 3 or 4 times more expensive than House of the Dragon. And the Rings of Power being this expensive actually leads to my next point, which is number 7, this story. The Rings of Power leaned too hard on the show being shiny and grand and glorious that they forgot to write the story. I always say that 20 minutes of House of the Dragon has a lot more going on than a complete episode of the Rings of Power, considering the fact that they both are prequels to some great stuff, which means we know where the story ends. As I mentioned before, House of the Dragon is a lot more generous with the source material compared to the Rings of Power. The worst part is House of the Dragon has a lot more limited material than the Rings of Power, and that means that the TV show and the writers are not doing a good job. Number 8. This is something personal. The age rating. It is actually pretty important for me that the TV show that I'm watching is R-rated. I want to see that gore and violence. Age rating of House of the Dragon is mature, but even in this one, the Rings of Power is confusing, and it does make the audience confused because sometimes it is gory, sometimes it is silly, sometimes there is a lot of blood, sometimes we don't see any, and even it is confusing in that matter as well. And for the writing, I just want to mention these two dialogues and compare these two TV shows.
How long have we been clear of it?
Nearly a mile.
I see.
Do you?
A true queen counts the cost to her people.
And yet you toil still in service to men. Your father, your husband, your son. You desire not to be free, but to make a window in the wall of your prison. Have you never imagined yourself on the Iron Throne?
The writings of the Rings of Power, considering the great material, is just bad. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening to my voice. Tell me, what did you think about these two TV shows? Did you get the chance to watch them both at the same time? And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.